Hello, my name is Samuel Stelzner. I'm from Stellenbosch University in South Africa. This presentation forms part of the validation process for my Industrial Engineering Masters Thesis, entitled The Employee Flourishing Strategic Framework. A word on what to expect during the presentation. It's about 30 slides long. It contains a general overview of my research story, and it touches on some specifics related to your field of expertise. Thanks for lending your time. I'm excited to receive your feedback and see what opportunities this leads to. So here's a quick look at the structure of the presentation. I'll start with a bit of background about how this all came about. I'll then introduce the research from an academic perspective. Next is the way the research was conducted, followed by its output, and ending with the process from here on. So in 2014, I did some vacation work for Transport for Cape Town's innovation unit. I spent a lot of my time shadowing the head of the unit. In April 2015, he left the city and entered the startup world. He invited me to join him, an offer I excitedly accepted. Before starting anything, we spoke at length about the way we would like to do business. This was largely influenced by his mixed experiences in the public sector and previously in management consulting. We arrived at the mission statement, simply making happiness happen. This would come to define the culture of our startup. We then proceeded to build a team of partners and a network of businesses. The first of these was Chop Chop, a healthy fast food franchise, pictured here, and you can find it at 75 Harrington Street, Cape Town. So this experience had a big impact on me. The idea of simply making happiness happen has come to define my worldview and set of values. The homepage of my personal blog on the topic is pictured here. This experience also came at a time when I was exploring potential research topics for my master's. I must say I've thoroughly enjoyed researching a topic that I'm intrinsically motivated by. Right, now that I've given you some context, I'll move on to the actual academic content. This study is rooted in the industrial engineering domain. Industrial engineering is concerned with the improvement of integrated systems, for example, an enterprise, are also the core focus of positive psychology, a field that has further inspired the study. Positive psychology is defined as the formulation and building of the good life. The experience of the good life is expressed as people's ultimate goal. Many would describe the good life as one that is filled with happiness. So you can see that the parallels between positive psychology and my startup experience are clear. A focus on people is the link between industrial engineering and positive psychology. In this study, I propose designing an enterprise to provide employees with the experience of the good life. I argue that an employee who receives this experience is motivated to sustain the enterprise that provides it. So designing for the experience of the good life is therefore a strategy for long-term gains in enterprise performance. This is the guiding mandate of industrial engineering. Positive psychology emerged in the 90s in an effort to complement the traditional areas of psychology. Psychologists have become very good at treating depression and other conditions of mental illness over the last 50 years. Experts say that the challenge for the next 50 is to do the same for happiness. The science of happiness has brought some much-needed structure to what has become something of a global movement. This is evidenced in politics. For example, United Nations Resolution 65/309, titled Happiness Towards a Holistic Approach to Development, and the Gross National Happiness Metric, described as a policy of balancing sustainable growth against the often damaging results of rampant wealth. There is also increasing attention being paid to happiness in the workplace. For example, Silicon Valley has started a trend of hiring chief happiness officers in charge of the well-being of their employees. Enterprises are beginning to manage their employees' experience of the good life. So my research purpose is to assist in this endeavor. It is to develop a conceptual model to assist enterprises in managing the employee experience of the good life. In order to achieve the research purpose, the study is split into 11 chapters. In summary, the research unfolds as follows. Chapters 1 and 2 investigate current literature from positive psychology, as well as develop the business case for managing employee happiness. Chapter 3 investigates what type of conceptual model is useful from an enterprise perspective. The first 3 chapters then feed the development of the model's design requirements in Chapter 4. A methodology for translating these design requirements into an actual model is developed in Chapter 5. This model is then designed and optimized in Chapters 6, 7, and 8. The model has been verified to have met the design requirements. I'm now engaging in validation to see that it effectively meets a business need. I'll now walk you through this roadmap in a little bit more detail. A key component of this chapter is to investigate literature surrounding the experience of the good life. Positive psychology is a relatively new field. One issue is that there does not seem to be a globally accepted construct for this experience. This study is therefore positioned as an early adopter of the contents of this developing field. It includes a critical discussion on developing a construct for the experience of the good life. This discussion arrives at the notion of flourishing, a construct developed by Martin Seligman, former president of the American Psychological Association and widely regarded as the founding father of positive psychology. Flourishing is defined by the pillars on which it is built, 5 pursuits that are all empirically proven to be self-evident. They are positive emotion, engagement, relationship, meaning, and accomplishment, collectively known as PERMA. This construct has since been extended by a team conducting research in Australian schools. Their study includes control of depression and anxiety, items from the negative end of the mental health continuum, in order to ensure that a holistic view of mental health is accounted for. This study produces a questionnaire that forms the basis for a state-of-the-art measurement of the experience of the good life, a term that I will henceforth refer to as flourishing. A strategic framework is adopted as an appropriate type of conceptual model. The title, Employee Flourishing Strategic Framework, or EFSF, is now clear. The key characteristics of a strategic framework are that it provides all the necessary steps for completing management activities, it packages the bodies of knowledge linked to employee flourishing, and it does all this at the objective level. This last point highlights that my study is positioned as a broad overview, applicable to all enterprises and a starting point for further and more localized research and application. As mentioned, the first 3 chapters feed the development of design requirements. There are 21 in total. These requirements are categorized in a manner that is typical to engineering studies. Some generic requirements from these categories are added. Some key design requirements are that the EFSF should prescribe a process for managing employee flourishing, supplemented by a set of tools and demonstrated by developing elements that may be of practical use to a variety of enterprises. The design methodology is the means for translating the design requirements into a physical output. This methodology was also inspired by my startup experience, where we subscribe to the lean startup philosophy. This is characterized by the build, measure, learn cycle. This means developing iterations of concepts that are quickly tested and released. At Chop Chop, for example, we first made lunch for our 5 neighbors on the 4th floor, then moved into the basement, and eventually opened to the public. From a research perspective, one of the main benefits of this approach is that it allows the researcher to walk readers through the stage development of the framework, allowing them to leverage the logic for further studies and local application. So to expand on this, an initial framework process is developed from an observation according to inductive research theory. This process is then run through and optimized using deductive research. This includes the development of tools and elements that detail the process. Lessons from the run-through are then captured and used to iterate the framework process. And on top of that, contextual literature reviews are made throughout the study. So here is a quick sequence of the evolution of the framework process. Ending in this detailed third iteration, which I'll expand on shortly. Before getting onto the detailed process, here is a snapshot of some of the tools and elements developed during the study. They are listed per stage of the EFSF process. For example, early on in the process, I call for establishing a strategic vision and mission based on the enterprise's interpretation of flourishing. The appropriate tool is a literature review of vision and mission statements. As a result of my investigation into the state-of-the-art of employee happiness, I offer the following mission statement: to maximize the experience of PERMA and minimize the experience of depression and anxiety across all members of the enterprise. A number of bodies of knowledge are identified during the study as relevant to the topic of managing employee flourishing. These bodies of knowledge are used to build the EFSF. I will showcase each in turn by highlighting relevant sections of the EFSF process. Firstly, a systems approach exists at the core of the EFSF process. The systems approach states that constituent parts combine to form an interrelated whole. A better overall understanding of a problem is gained by building up the whole as a sum of the individual parts. The whole problem is broken down into the parts of the problem. Solutions are investigated in response to the parts of the problem. These are then packaged into the whole solution. The systems approach forms part of the enterprise engineering domain. I'm in the Enterprise Engineering Research Group at Stellenbosch University. Enterprise engineering is the application of design principles to business management. It recognizes that enterprises are highly complex entities. Management therefore requires a holistic approach. The enterprise engineering perspective is thus facilitated by the systems approach. The EFSF advises enterprises to take stock of the whole problem, also termed consequences of the faltering development of flourishing, derive the problem parts, or obstacles to flourishing, evaluate the solution parts, means to flourish effectively, and consequently develop the whole solution, termed an employee flourishing program. More on this at a later stage. Showcasing the whole problem combines with a change management process to initiate the EFSF. The EFSF is aimed at established enterprises. It is noted that adopting a perspective of employee flourishing is likely to require some enterprise change. One of the main reasons for this is the legacy of Frederick Taylor's principles of scientific management. Taylor separates management from the enterprise in a mechanistic view. The enterprise, like a machine, needs to be controlled by management. This view has come under criticism for its view of employees as mere cogs in the machine. My study calls for a changed approach. Literature states that change management programs are successful when initiated at the beginning of a project, hence its early inclusion. The Harvard Business Review presents Kotter's Leading Change as its feature article in its 2011 edition on 10 must-reads on change management. Kotter's work has since been updated to remain at the forefront of change management. It is therefore used as the primary source for developing a change management process within the EFSF. The first 3 steps of Kotter's process are specified in the first stage of the EFSF process, labeled here as initiate a change towards flourishing. The first step is to create a sense of urgency surrounding the problem of employee flourishing. My main strategy for creating a sense of urgency is to appeal to the enterprise's top execs. Usually bound by shareholder expectations, an emphasis is placed on highlighting the business appeal of managing employee flourishing. This includes, firstly, highlighting the correlation between flourishing and short-term performance, as evidenced by Gallup, for example, whose study shows that positive employees are 33% more profitable. Secondly, leveraging case studies of successful enterprises that champion the case for employee flourishing. For example, Zappos, whose CEO, Tony Hsieh, argues in his book Delivering Happiness that companies should make happiness their business model. Google is, of course, another prominent example of a company that champions the case for managing happiness. The second step of the change management process is to build a guiding coalition from a strategic HRM unit. This unit should carry influence throughout the enterprise. The term flourishing coalition is adopted. The flourishing coalition should lead flourishing projects through the upcoming innovation management process. The third step, before getting onto that process, is to form a strategic vision and mission that describes the enterprise's understanding of flourishing based on the state of the art. This sets the basis for forming a flourishing metric. Forming such a metric is critical because, as it is often quoted in business, what you measure is what you get. While an invention is a new or novel idea, an innovation is the successful commercialization of such an idea. The EFSF incorporates innovation management to ensure ideas surrounding employee flourishing are successfully implemented. These are termed flourishing projects. The EFSF's primary source for innovation management is the book Design for Six Sigma plus Lean Toolset. Six Sigma effectively means reducing defects in a process to under 3.4 per million. Lean management is a systematic method for eliminating waste. They are thus both forms of optimization. The book offers the DMADV phased approach as a best-in-class approach for effectively and efficiently realizing ideas. DMADV equals define, measure, analyze, design, verify. So once a strategic vision and mission have been defined in the initial stages of change management, a flourishing project is defined by the flourishing coalition. Employee needs are then measured in the second and third quadrants of the systems approach. Concepts to fulfill these needs are analyzed and form part of an employee flourishing program in quadrant 4 of the systems approach. The best concept is selected and designed in detail. The detailed concept is verified by developing a supporting implementation process and handing it over to the appropriate enterprise team. The DMADV phases are interspersed by gate reviews to evaluate whether the phase has been successfully completed. After verification of a flourishing project, the flourishing coalition returns to the defined phase to embark on further projects. The EFSF presents a literature review of positive psychology within the systems approach and as part of the measure phase of the innovation management process. It is noted that many of the reviewed concepts overlap with concepts from the field of organizational behavior. This review complements the earlier review of the state-of-the-art of employee happiness that produced the construct of flourishing. This section focuses on employee needs, categorized into obstacles to flourishing and means to flourish effectively. I theorize that the problem of a lack of flourishing at work can be seen as a result of individual obstacles. The elements that I describe in this section are, for example, the downside to economic utility, where I make the point that measuring economic growth is not a holistic approach to measuring human well-being. Secondly, hedonic adaptation, a model that states that as people improve their realities, their expectations shift, causing their happiness to remain constant. Instead of looking immediately for solutions to obstacles to flourishing, I reference literature on independently derived means to flourish effectively. The primary source of inspiration for this section is a study of the chronic factors of happiness. This study produces intentional activity as the most promising source of producing sustained increases in happiness. Intentional activity is distinguished as the way people act on their circumstances. It is theorized to have a greater effect on happiness than circumstances such as income, health, and relationship status. This calls into question traditional performance management, where benefits do not extend far beyond salaries and medical aid. I advise enterprises to create conditions for employees to pursue other means of flourishing effectively. Other means I discuss include innate psychological needs, such as PERMA, autonomy and competence, as well as character strengths and virtues. The field of human resource management, or HRM, is readily seen as relevant to the EFSF. The first steps of the change management process call for a flourishing coalition to be built from an HRM unit. This is based on the evolution of HRM into a more strategic role player within the enterprise. The concept of the human resource advantage has propelled HRM above its traditional administrative role. It now plays a key part in producing organizational effectiveness, meaning that it enables an enterprise to achieve its strategic goals. The EFSF therefore prompts building a flourishing coalition from a strategic HRM unit. This coalition should work alongside an executive committee and across enterprise teams to ensure employee flourishing is ingrained into the enterprise. The coalition takes primary responsibility for developing flourishing projects during the innovation management process. Strategic HRM is also particularly relevant. It's particularly relevant to the fourth quadrant of the systems approach. The fourth quadrant contains the whole solution, described as an employee flourishing program. The simple procedure for building an employee flourishing program is as follows. Highlight an obstacle to flourishing and/or a means to flourish effectively, and develop a concept in response. These concepts are typically formed as HRM systems and practices. The slide includes a snapshot of some of my ideas for an employee flourishing program. For example, 20% time, the first concept shown. This is a practice used by Google that allows employees to work on their own projects for 20% of the time. Gmail is an example of a product that originated from 20% time. 20% time, I propose that it meets the innate psychological need of autonomy, as previously discussed, as a means to flourish effectively. This concept is then packaged into the HRM system of job analysis and design. These high-level concepts are then specified as the flourishing project continues into the design phase of innovation management. The first three steps of Kotter's change management process are incorporated to the beginning of the EFSF. The fourth step, enlisting a volunteer army, is thought to happen relatively organically. Employees are likely to volunteer to a program aimed at improving their experience of work. The fifth step, enable action by removing barriers, is highlighted as a key concept within an employee flourishing program. This extends to the design of the enterprise as a whole. The final three steps are incorporated to the end of the EFSF. At this stage, the EFSF calls for generating short-term wins by assessing and marketing the impact of a flourishing project on the flourishing metric, sustaining acceleration by rapidly repeating the EFSF process to generate further flourishing projects, and then instituting change by assessing a correlation between improvements in flourishing metrics and increased enterprise performance, showing that the enterprise may indeed be sustained through flourishing projects. Cementing the change towards flourishing concludes the EFSF process. I hope that this process can be used to bring flourishing to the workplace and thereby produce business success, and, in the case of Chop Chop, a flourishing rooftop garden to boot. I take confidence from the fact that time and time again, success seems to result from happiness and not the other way around. I'm currently working on validating the usefulness of the study in achieving this vision. This requires obtaining external perspective, hence your participation. Please can you now turn your attention towards the questionnaire I've provided. This is my means of capturing all data from the validation process. I'm specifically looking for your expert opinion on whether managing employee flourishing or happiness is recognized as a business need, whether the design of my research is appropriate, and whether my research output effectively addresses the business need. This includes evaluating the validity of the contents I've derived from the bodies of knowledge in which you consider yourself to be experts. So please tick the appropriate boxes and use the blocks to provide any further comments. Your answers will inform final amendments to the EFSF and recommendations for future research. Thank you once again for your time.